You're wasting everyone's time. If you can't stop crying, then get off the stage." Those were the cruel words a strict teacher hurled at young Lily during her piano rehearsal. What no one knew was that Lily had just begun playing a song she wrote for her late mother, a song born from heartbreak, silence, and sacred memory. Humiliated and shamed, Lily almost gave up music forever, until a quiet voice, a white rose, and a promise to her mom pulled her back to the keys. This is the soul-stirring story of how a grieving girl transformed sorrow into a melody that would touch millions and teach the world what music is truly for. Now, before we dive deeper, please subscribe to our channel. We share powerful, meaningful stories like this every day. And drop a comment below to let us know where you're watching from. Thank you so much, and now let's get back to the story. You're not ready for this stage, Lily. If you can't handle a simple rehearsal, then maybe the recital isn't for you. The words hit like the sharp crack of a ruler against a desk. They rang out across the auditorium, slicing through the murmurs of classmates and bouncing off the polished wood floor. Lily's fingers hovered uncertainly above the piano keys, her face burning with humiliation. Her throat clenched so tightly it hurt to swallow. All she had wanted was to finish the song, but the tears had betrayed her first. She blinked furiously, trying to wipe them away without letting anyone see. It was too late. The moment had already landed like a stone dropped in still water ripples of whispers, eyes darting the silence thicker than judgment itself. Mrs. Connors, arms crossed like a gatekeeper of dignity, stood at the edge of the stage watching Lily as though she'd just committed a crime against music itself. Her lips were drawn in that hard, immovable line she wore like a mask. Years of piano recitals, hundreds of students, and still she had never tolerated what she called emotional indulgence. Behind her, a few students shifted awkwardly in the front rows of the auditorium. A boy coughed to break the tension, and a girl nudged her friend, whispering something with a smirk. But most eyes stayed glued to Lily. Some curious, some pitying, most just uncomfortable. The kind of gaze that says, "I'm glad it's not me." Lily felt her hands shake her shoulders, rise and fall too fast. The piano keys blurred in front of her as her tears fell onto the polished ivory. She hated herself for crying. Not here. Not now. Not in front of them. And yet, she hadn't meant for the emotions to rise up like that. But the moment her fingers found the melody, that melody, her chest had caved in like a dam cracking under pressure. That song wasn't just notes on paper. It wasn't just something she had practiced. It was her. Every measure, every breath between chords, it belonged to someone she had lost. Someone who once hummed lullabies at night and told her, "Play from the heart, baby girl. That's where the music lives." Lily tried to speak, but her lips couldn't form words. The lump in her throat was too thick, made of memories and longing. I'm sorry," she whispered, barely audible. "Sorry doesn't change the fact you wasted everyone's time, Mrs. Connors snapped, then turned to the rest of the students. "Let's move on. Chloe, you're next. Please, no drama this time." Lily stood from the piano bench like a ghost, leaving a stage it never belonged on. Her feet felt heavy as stone as she walked down the stairs and toward the side aisle. The piano, the one thing that used to feel like home now, looked like a stranger. She passed by Mrs. Connors, who didn't even glance her way, just clicked her pen, marked something in her clipboard, and waved in the next girl. Chloe took her place at the piano with confident grace, flipping her hair before settling her fingers. She played sharp, clean, flawless, but there was no soul in it, and nobody seemed to notice. Lily didn't go back to the rehearsal room. She slipped outside the auditorium doors and kept walking until she reached the far end of the school's empty hallway. There, just beside the janitor's closet, she sat on the cold floor and hugged her knees to her chest. The silence outside the auditorium was softer, kinder. Here, no one was watching her break. She pressed her palms against her face, trying to contain the storm inside her. But it was no use. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her mother's face, pale, smiling, tired, holding her hand in the hospital bed and saying, "Keep writing songs, okay? Even if nobody listens. Play them like I'm still right beside you." Her song had been titled, "Still With Me." She never told anyone that. Not the teacher, not the class, not even the principal. It was private, sacred. The only thing she had left that still connected her to the woman who used to braid her hair before lessons and tape stars on her music sheets. And now, it felt ruined, stained by the memory of that moment on stage, the way they all looked at her, the way she couldn't finish what she started. She stayed there a while, long after Chloe's confident piece ended, and polite applause trickled from the auditorium. Her legs went numb. The hallway lights buzzed faintly above her. She didn't move until she heard the faint sound of shoes approaching, measured deliberate steps echoing closer. "Lily!" She startled and looked up. It was Mr. Dorsey, the school principal. He didn't speak right away, just looked at her with something softer than what she expected, something not filled with judgment or disappointment. "I saw what happened," he said, gently crouching beside her. "And I want you to know, I'm sorry you were treated that way." Lily bit her lip, looked down. "I ruined it," she murmured. "No, you didn't." His voice was firm now, resolute. "You were playing something real. I don't know what that song was, but it meant something. And that kind of honesty is rare, Lily. Don't let anyone convince you that vulnerability is a weakness." She glanced at him, uncertain. He nodded. "You still want to play at the recital?" he asked. Lily opened her mouth, then hesitated. The memory of Mrs. Connors's glare, the whispers, the way she froze halfway through. How could she face all that again? "I don't know," she said. Mr. Dorsey leaned against the wall beside her, letting the silence stretch a little. When he finally spoke, it was quiet but powerful. "Then do it for her," he said. Her head turned sharply. Her eyes narrowed in confusion. "For who?" He smiled softly. "Whoever you wrote that song for." The tears started again, but slower this time. Not hot and angry, but warm, almost gentle. She nodded just once. That night, Lily didn't sleep. She sat at the upright piano in her living room, the one her mother used to play. She ran her fingers along the worn keys, each one with a memory, each note a ghost. She pulled out the crumpled sheet music she'd written by hand, covered in smudges and penciled in changes. "Still with me." She began again from the top. This time, not for the audience, not for the teacher, just for the memory of a woman who once whispered lullabies and called her songbird. She didn't know what would happen on recital night, whether the crowd would laugh or judge or sit in silence, but something inside her had shifted. This time, she would finish it. The next morning, the light through the window painted golden streaks across Lily's bedroom wall. She had fallen asleep at the piano bench, her cheek resting gently on the warm wood fingers still curled on the edge of the keys. A thin blanket had been draped across her shoulders, her father's quiet way of offering comfort without words. Downstairs, the kettle whistled faintly. The smell of toast drifted up through the hallway. But Lily didn't move. Her eyes remained closed as the last notes of her mother's lullaby lingered in her dreams, threading between memory and melody. When she finally stirred, she reached for the pencil on the music stand and made a few small marks on the page. She adjusted 2 measures in the middle of the piece. One chord felt too sharp. She softened it. It needed to ache, not scream. The pain in the piece had to be gentle, like grief you've made peace with, even if it still visits. At school, the atmosphere had shifted. Whispers trailed her like wind through leaves. Girls in the hallway glanced at her with curious expressions, some confused, some mocking. One boy muttered something about crybaby keys as she passed, earning a quiet laugh from his friend. Lily kept walking, her books clutched tightly to her chest. She reached the music room early 30 minutes before class. The door was unlocked. The light was still off. Alone, she stepped inside and made her way to the piano in the corner, her footsteps barely making a sound on the tiled floor. The same piano, the one that had witnessed her break. This time she sat down with no audience. She opened her folder and laid the sheet music on the stand. Her hands trembled as she placed her fingers on the keys, not from fear, but from the weight of meaning. And then she played. Not loud, not fast, just honest. Each note was a thread connecting her to something deeper than stage fright or expectations. Her mother's voice filled the room, not in words, but in feeling. It was the quiet hum of love, the soft courage to grieve without shame. She didn't notice the door open, didn't hear the footsteps. Only when the music slowed to a close did she feel a presence nearby. She turned her head and saw Mrs. Connors standing just inside the doorway, arms crossed, but no clipboard in hand. The teacher didn't speak. Her expression was unreadable. Lily froze. She expected the same critique, the same cold dismissal, the reminder that technique mattered more than tears. But Mrs. Connors said nothing. Just looked at the music, then at Lily, then back again. Her eyes softened for just a second, like a crack in glass before it breaks. Then she turned and left without a word. The silence that followed felt heavier than the one that preceded it. Later that day, Lily received a folded note from the front office. It was in Mr. Dorsey's handwriting. "Meet me in the auditorium after school." She arrived just as the last bell rang. The auditorium was empty except for the principal, who stood near the front row facing the stage. He turned as she walked in and smiled. "I spoke to Mrs. Connors," he said. "You're back on the recital program. She approved it this morning." Lily blinked. "She did?" He nodded. "But only if you feel ready." She hesitated. The thought of standing on that stage again, of facing the eyes, the whisper sent a tremor through her. But something in her chest had changed since yesterday. A quiet anchor had returned. "I want to," she said softly. Mr. Dorsey smiled wider. "Good. Then I have a small favor to ask." She tilted her head. "Would you be willing to tell the audience what the song is about before you play?" he asked. "Just a few words. It doesn't have to be a speech, but I think they need to understand what they're about to hear." Lily's first instinct was to shake her head. The song was personal, private. Her heart translated into sound. Letting others hear it was one thing, but explaining it. She opened her mouth to decline, but then stopped. A memory flickered her mother's hand, brushing her hair back, whispering, "The bravest music is the kind you're scared to share." She nodded. "I'll try," she whispered. In the days that followed, Lily practiced in the early hours of morning and the fading light of evening. She worked not on perfection, but on truth. She didn't change the song to impress anyone. She simply tried to stay faithful to the emotion in it. Each time she played, she imagined the empty chair where her mother would have sat. And with each passing hour, the fears shrank just a little. The night of the recital arrived like a tide. Parents, siblings, teachers, and students filled the auditorium with a low hum of anticipation. Programs rustled. Conversations buzzed. Bright lights illuminated the grand piano center stage. A floral arrangement sat by the podium. The rows slowly filled, except for one chair in the front row, which remained deliberately empty. Lily peeked from behind the curtain, her fingers wrapped tightly around the edge of the fabric. Her heart raced. Her breathing faltered. The auditorium looked enormous now. Every light a spotlight. Every whisper a shout. Mr. Dorsey stood backstage with her, calm and warm. "You're not here to impress anyone," he said. "You're here to remember someone." She swallowed hard and nodded. Then her name was announced. A hush fell over the crowd. She stepped onto the stage slowly, like someone stepping into sacred ground. The air felt thick. Her legs were steady, but her heart pounded like a drum. She reached the piano bench and paused. Then, without looking up, she turned to the microphone and spoke. "This song is called 'Still With Me,'" she said quietly. "I wrote it for my mom." That was all. She sat. The silence remained. Her fingers hovered above the keys just like the last time. Then she began to play. Not as a student, not for a grade, not for praise. She played as a daughter. As the notes filled the room, they carried more than melody. They carried memory, raw, vulnerable, aching memory. The kind that breaks something open and lets light in. The kind that doesn't ask for approval, only understanding. Halfway through, the tears came again. But this time, Lily didn't stop. The first note lingered like a breath held at the edge of memory. It floated gently into the air, soft, uncertain, but deeply human. Lily's fingers caressed the keys like they were pages in a letter written long ago. Her shoulders trembled slightly, not from fear now, but from the overwhelming tenderness of the act itself. She wasn't playing for applause. She wasn't even playing for the people in the room. She was playing for the one person who was no longer there to hear it, and for herself. The melody moved slowly, rising like mist from a valley after rain. Each chord held emotion as fragile as glass. Notes fell like tears, clear, honest, and unhidden. Lily's body swayed with the rhythm, not with practiced discipline, but with the instinctive grace of someone speaking fluently in a language of loss. The auditorium, moments ago alive with quiet chatter, had fallen into a breathless stillness. Every shuffle ceased. Every cough was swallowed. Even the children stopped fidgeting. Something was happening on that stage, something none of them had prepared for. Mrs. Connors sat in the second row, her arms folded stiffly in her lap. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes, trained to detect flaws, hesitated now because there was something raw in what she was witnessing. Not polish, not technique, but truth. She had heard thousands of performances. Perfectly executed pieces, competitions, won symphonies delivered with robotic elegance. But this was different. This wasn't performance. This was confession. It was vulnerability, heartbreak, and grace threaded through notes that bent but did not break. Halfway through, Lily's hands slowed at a delicate passage, the one that always made her eyes burn. She had rewritten this part 3 times in the week before the recital. She could never decide how to end it. But last night she stopped trying to perfect it. She let it ache instead. Her breath caught as the familiar emotion swelled in her chest. She could feel it, the lump in her throat, the sudden wave of warmth behind her eyes. This was the moment she had frozen during rehearsal. This was the moment Mrs. Connors had scolded her for crying. The moment everyone had looked away like her pain was inconvenient. But not this time. This time, her tears came silently sliding down her cheeks as her fingers continued to move. The audience saw it. A girl crying openly on stage. But they didn't shift uncomfortably. They didn't whisper or stare with pity. They watched wide-eyed, their own throats tightening. Because somehow, through her grief, Lily was telling their stories too. She was singing for every person they had ever lost. She was the daughter saying goodbye, the child remembering a lullaby, the part of them that had stayed quiet for too long. A single sniffle broke the silence. Someone near the back of the hall quickly muffled. Then another. A hand reached for a tissue. An arm wrapped gently around a spouse's shoulder. Lily didn't see them. She saw only the empty chair. She had placed a white rose on it before the performance when the auditorium was still quiet. One bloom. No name. But she knew who it was for. She imagined her mother sitting there, smiling eyes full of pride and gentle mischief. The song reached its final crescendo, a swell of sound like a heartbeat echoing through a cathedral. Her hands pressed firmly into the last chords, as if anchoring her mother's memory in every corner of the room. Then silence. Not the awkward kind. Not the confused kind. The kind that wraps around you like a blanket and leaves your soul reverent. Lily lowered her hands. Her shoulders slowly dropped. She didn't move from the bench. Her breath trembled. Her eyes glistened. She looked up and saw them standing. One by one, the audience rose. First a mother in the third row wiping her face, then a teacher near the side aisle. Then a boy from Lily's own class who had once called her weird. His hands red from clapping his eyes wide with something that looked a lot like shame. They stood not because they were impressed, but because they were moved. Because something inside them had changed. Lily blinked, stunned. For a moment, she couldn't even understand what was happening. The applause didn't come all at once. It began as a slow ripple, hesitant, like they were afraid to break the spell. Then it grew thunderous, warm, uncontainable. And still she didn't stand. She just looked toward the chair with the rose and smiled. Backstage, Mr. Dorsey wiped his eyes discreetly and whispered something to the technician nearby. "Get that performance recorded. That's going to mean something to people someday." Mrs. Connors remained seated for several moments longer than the others. Her eyes, usually so hard and analytical, glistened now behind her glasses. She had never been one for sentiment. She had always believed music was something to conquer, not something to bleed for. But Lily had changed that tonight. She stood slowly, knees stiff, as though rising to face something she'd never dared to admit she had been wrong. When Lily stepped down from the stage and walked slowly down the aisle, people reached out to touch her shoulder, to whisper, "Thank you," to offer a soft nod of recognition. She had become something she never expected seen. Her father met her near the auditorium door, eyes full but smiling. He didn't speak. He just held her hand tightly as they walked toward the exit. Behind her, applause still echoed. Mrs. Connors approached the empty stage. Her heels clicked across the wooden floor. She stopped in front of the piano and looked down at the sheet music Lily had left behind. Just 4 words were written at the bottom in soft pencil. "For Mom. Still with me." The teacher stood frozen, her fingers brushing the edge of the page. Her throat tightened. She had heard Lily play it before, halting, tearful, unfinished. She had dismissed it as weakness. She hadn't realized she was listening to a farewell. Now for the first time she saw the music for what it was, not flawed, but fragile, not incomplete, but intimate, and it broke something in her. It made her remember a time years ago when she too had played with feeling, not fear. Before the rules, before the rigid posture and red markings on student score sheets. Back when she still believed music could be a place to hide your heart, not guard it. She folded the paper gently as though afraid it might shatter. Then she sat on the piano bench alone, and for the first time in decades, she closed her eyes and began to play, not for perfection, but to remember. The chair remained untouched as the auditorium emptied. The white rose on its seat glowed faintly under the fading lights, still solemn, a quiet witness to everything that had passed. Most people filed out with wet eyes and hushed voices, carrying in their hearts something they hadn't expected to find that night. Not just a performance, but a remembrance, a mirror, a truth too big for applause. Lily lingered near the doorway, her hand still tucked in her father's. She glanced over her shoulder at the stage where echoes still seemed to hum in the wooden walls. Something sacred had happened there. She could feel it, like a soft thread wrapped around her, connecting her to the woman whose lullabies once cradled her dreams. She had done it. She had finished the song. She had spoken without words, and somehow the world had heard her. "I think she would have been proud," her father said gently, his voice breaking the silence. Lily looked up at him, surprised to see his eyes glassy. He rarely cried, not even at the funeral, but tonight was different. Tonight the silence between them had been replaced by something real, something her music had built. "She was there," Lily whispered. He nodded without question, squeezing her hand tighter. No need for explanations. Some truths speak louder than logic. Behind them, Mrs. Connors stepped slowly down from the stage, her heels echoing across the wooden floor with a rhythm that sounded different now. No longer sharp, no longer driven by precision. Her steps had softened. She moved like someone walking through a memory. She stopped near the white rose. The chair stood silent, its symbolism now impossible to ignore. It wasn't just a placeholder. It was a presence, a vow, a tribute to someone the world didn't know, but had just heard through the hands of her daughter. Mrs. Connors stared at it for a long time. She didn't know Lily's mother's name. She didn't know what she looked like or what kind of music she loved. But she knew what kind of love had created that song. She had felt it undeniable, raw, and deeply real. And it humbled her in a way that technique and trophies never could. Something in her chest shifted. A weight she didn't know she was carrying slid down her spine and dissolved into the air. She turned and found herself walking toward Lily and her father. They turned as she approached, and for the first time in the 2 years she had taught Lily, Mrs. Connors did something unexpected. She smiled. Not the polite kind she gave at the start of recitals. Not the tight one used during parent-teacher conferences. This was different. It was human. It held apology, admiration, and maybe a touch of regret. "You played beautifully," she said softly, her voice no longer lined with steel. "And bravely." Lily looked up, uncertain how to respond. Mrs. Connors cleared her throat. "I misjudged you, and your music." Lily's brows furrowed slightly. "You said I wasted everyone's time." The teacher's face fell gently. "I know," she said, "and I was wrong." Lily waited, watching her. A long silence passed. My mother taught me to play, Mrs. Connors added, her voice trembling just enough to be noticed. When I was little, she passed before I ever played on a real stage. I thought, if I buried the feeling, I could survive the loss. I thought, if I kept everything clean and controlled, I wouldn't break. She took a breath and smiled sadly. But you broke, and you didn't run. You played through it. I haven't heard that kind of courage in a long time. Lily's eyes shimmered. She didn't know what to say, so she did what her mother used to tell her to do when words failed. She reached into her folder, took out the handwritten sheet music, and held it out. Mrs. Connors looked at it, surprised, unsure. This is for you, Lily said, voice quiet. I made a copy. The teacher took the paper like it was glass. Her hands trembled. Thank you, she whispered. Lily gave a shy smile. Maybe you can play it too, for your mom. For a brief second, the walls between them, teacher and student, judge and performer, crumbled into dust. What remained were two daughters connected not by rules or roles, but by grief and melody. Mrs. Connors nodded. I will. That night, Lily couldn't sleep, but she didn't feel restless. She sat by the window, moonlight spilling across her floor, and let the silence wrap around her. Not the lonely kind. The kind that feels like being held. Her father had left the white rose on the kitchen table. A simple reminder. A small bloom that said everything without a sound. She opened her music journal and began to write again. Not out of sadness, but of something new. A peace. A reverence. A belief that music was more than performance. It was memory. It was presence. It was love still echoing. The next day at school, things were not the same. Her classmates, usually indifferent or distant, now looked at her differently. Some still whispered, but the tone had changed. There was awe in their eyes. Even the ones who'd laughed before now approached her desk during homeroom, murmuring soft, "You were amazing," or quiet, "My mom cried." And Chloe, perfect polished Chloe, walked past her in the hallway and paused. I can't stop thinking about your song, she said. It made me think of my grandma. She passed in January. I didn't know how to grieve until last night. Lily smiled gently. I'm glad it helped. At lunch, she sat alone again, but this time by choice. She needed the quiet. She wasn't hiding. She was reflecting. And as she looked out at the courtyard where kids laughed and shared food and phones, she realized something strange. She wasn't invisible anymore. Not because she had impressed them, but because she had moved them. And that difference mattered. After school, Mrs. Connors did something no one expected. She stood in front of her music class, holding a folder. I'd like to play something, she said. It's not from the syllabus. The students blinked, confused. Mrs. Connors never played. She judged. She instructed. She demonstrated occasionally. But play for them, never. She sat at the piano and began to play Lily's song, Still With Me. The same haunting melody. The same aching tenderness. But through the hands of someone older, someone whose fingers had once been young and brave and had forgotten what it felt like to feel. And this time, when she reached the final note, she let her own tears fall. The students didn't laugh. They listened. They understood. Music class changed after that. It became less about right and wrong, less about control, more about expression, emotion, meaning. Mrs. Connors no longer interrupted trembling hands or dismissed pauses of feeling. She began asking students why they chose their songs, what stories hid between the bars. And Lily, still quiet, still small in stature, became something rare, a leader without needing to speak. Her song had made a crack in the walls around them, and through that crack light was pouring in. The white rose remained on her teacher's desk for weeks afterward, unmoving, a symbol. A promise that music, when it comes from truth, doesn't fade. It echoes, and it heals. Close your eyes, baby, her mother whispered, brushing a loose strand of hair from Lily's forehead. Now tell me, can you hear it? Lily, small and tucked beside her mother's frail body on the hospital bed, closed her eyes and pressed her ear against the fading rhythm of a chest that had once been strong enough to lift her into the air. That rhythm, the soft, slow thump, had always calmed her. It was her first lullaby. I can hear it, she whispered. Her mother smiled, though her lips were pale, and her voice came through the rasp of exhaustion. That's music too. Life is full of songs no one writes down. You just have to listen closely. Outside, rain tapped gently against the window like quiet fingers playing along the glass. The hospital light above flickered faintly. Machines beeped their monotone warnings and reminders uncaring of moments like this. Lily turned toward her face flushed from holding back tears. "Can I play something for you when I get home?" Her mother nodded slowly. "Promise me, you'll write it first. Make something just for me. A song that's ours. One that says what words can't." Lily's throat tightened. "Like what? Like, I'm not ready to say goodbye, but I will." Her mother smiled gently. "And even if you can't see me, I'll still be near. Make it soft. Make it simple, like how you hum when you don't know I'm listening." Lily looked down at her small hands. "But what if it's not good? It'll be perfect," she whispered. "Because it'll be true." Those were the last words her mother ever spoke to her. Lily replayed them every day after. She never recorded them, never wrote them in a journal. They were too sacred for ink, too alive to be held by paper. Instead, she poured them into a melody, slowly, painfully, note by note. The day after the funeral, while others filled the house with casseroles and sympathy, Lily sat on the floor beside the family piano and began the first chord. Her fingers trembled. Her chest ached. The world was too loud, too bright, too cruel. But that one chord, 3 notes rising into the still air, was like reaching across a veil and touching her mother's hand. The song didn't come all at once. It came in pieces, like memory. One day, the middle section appeared to her while watching leaves fall from the tree outside her bedroom. Another day, she woke up from a dream and rushed to the piano to capture a fleeting fragment of melody before it slipped away. The most painful part was the end, because endings meant release, and she wasn't ready. For weeks, she left it unfinished. She played the first half over and over again, crying in silence. Her father heard it through the walls but never interrupted. He let her have that space just as her mother would have. One evening, she sat alone in the living room. The sun had dipped behind the hills. A soft dusk filled the room with golden shadows. The piano stood quietly waiting. She placed her fingers on the keys and closed her eyes. "Finish it," she heard her mother whisper in memory. "Not because you're letting go, but because you're holding on in a new way." And so, Lily played the final notes. The ending didn't resolve with a grand flourish. It faded. It drifted into silence like someone walking gently out of a room but leaving the door open. She wrote the title on the top of the page in the softest handwriting she could manage, "Still with me." She didn't show it to anyone, not at first. It was hers and her mother's. Until the day of rehearsal, when she thought maybe, just maybe, it was time to let someone else hear it. But the interruption came like thunder on a sunny day. Mrs. Connors, the scolding, the shame, the tears, and then the silence. For days after that failed rehearsal, Lily didn't touch the piano. She left the sheet music on her desk, unopened, folded like a letter never sent. She couldn't bear to look at it. Couldn't bear to feel like she had dishonored her mother by breaking down in front of strangers who didn't understand. Her grief became quiet again, private, locked inside, until Mr. Dorsey's words cracked something open. Then do it for her. Not for the recital, not for the audience, for her mother. That was the turning point. That night, Lily sat beside the piano again. She unfolded the music, pressed the creases flat with her hands, and whispered, "Okay." It wasn't a song anymore. It was a conversation. The days leading up to the recital blurred. People moved around her, teachers, students, posters, chairs, but she walked through it all like someone walking through sacred ground. And when she saw the white rose on the kitchen counter left by her father that morning, without a word, she knew she had to bring it to the auditorium. It would be her offering, her silent prayer. She placed it on the chair herself before the recital began when no one was looking. It sat there quietly, catching the glow of the stage lights like a candle in the dark. Even now, after the music had ended and the night had passed, the image of that rose stayed with her. Its petals, its stillness, its grace. That Sunday she visited her mother's grave for the first time since the funeral. Not because she had avoided it, but because she hadn't known what to say. Now she did. She brought no words, just her music journal. And she read the song out loud, measure by measure, as though her mother were sitting right beside her, leaning in with soft eyes and hands clasped like she used to when Lily performed in their living room. She didn't cry. Not this time. She felt warm, present, and when the breeze passed through the trees, she smiled. Later that night, she found something unexpected. A letter. It had fallen out from the back of her mother's music folder. A folder Lily hadn't touched since her mother's final weeks. It was yellowed, slightly creased. On the front, in her mother's delicate handwriting, it read, "For Lily, when you're ready." Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. The note inside was short. "If you're reading this, you've played something honest. You've made music from pain, and that makes it sacred. Don't ever think your tears are weakness. They're proof your soul is alive. I'm proud of you forever, and wherever you go, play like I'm still listening. Because I am." Lily didn't sob. She held the letter to her chest, closed her eyes, and breathed deeply. She had finished the song, but the music would never end. The auditorium stood in stillness long after the audience had gone. The rose remained, a single bloom resting on the cushioned seat of the front row chair, motionless beneath the overhead lights that now dimmed, one by one. Shadows deepened in the aisles. The echo of applause still pulsed faintly in the walls, but the moment itself had passed, leaving something behind that refused to fade. Lily lingered backstage, hands clasped, eyes drawn through the narrow curtain slit to that solitary white rose. It looked like it belonged there, not decorative, not accidental, but destined. Her father stood beside her, silent, giving her space. The kind of space that says, "I'm here, but I won't fill the silence you need." "Do you think she knew I'd play it?" Lily asked suddenly, her voice soft as breath. He looked down at her, surprised. "Your mom," Lily nodded. "That I'd finish it, that I'd share it with people." He smiled gently, eyes glinting. "She knew you better than anyone, Lily." Of course she knew. She didn't reply, just exhaled slowly, watching the stillness beyond the curtain as if it were sacred. The auditorium door creaked open far down the aisle. Mrs. Connors entered alone. She moved slowly with none of her usual authority. No clipboard, no sharp eyes scanning for faults. She approached the front row and stopped before the chair with the rose, and sat beside it. Her hands folded in her lap, her back straight as if expecting someone to sit beside her. She didn't touch the flower, didn't even look at the stage. She just stared forward, eyes wide, as though seeing something invisible to anyone else. Then she did something even more unexpected. She took a folded piece of paper from her pocket and opened it across her knees. It was the handwritten copy of Lily's song, the one Lily had given her the night before. Mrs. Connors stared at the lines for a long time. Her fingers traced one particular phrase, the descending three-note motif marked like a whisper. So she could still feel the echo of those notes from the night before. She hadn't slept after the recital. The music had followed her home, not as a melody, as a feeling. A question, really. What have I forgotten? For decades, she had lived by rules, discipline, structure, control. Her entire teaching philosophy had been born from pain she never shared, not even with herself. She had buried her own grief beneath technique. She had told herself emotion was a distraction because it had been too painful to remember what it once meant. Until a trembling girl played through tears and reminded her that some music can't be taught. It must be felt. She folded the paper again with reverence and looked up at the stage. Lily appeared from behind the curtain. She didn't speak. She simply walked to the edge of the stage and sat with her legs dangling over the front. They looked at each other for a moment. Teacher and student without hierarchy, without fear. "Would you like to sit?" Mrs. Connors asked gently. Lily nodded and climbed down. She walked quietly to the front row and took the seat on the opposite side of the rose. The two of them sat there, the flower between them. A boundary. A bridge. "You know," Mrs. Connors began, her voice low, "I used to think grief was something you got over, like an illness, something that healed if you gave it time. She shook her head slowly. But I was wrong. It's not a wound. It's a companion. Quiet, uninvited, but constant. Lily nodded slowly, unsure if she was meant to respond. Mrs. Connors continued, My mother passed when I was 18. I was supposed to perform at my first national competition that same month. I played anyway. Won the trophy even. But I couldn't hear the music. Lily tilted her head. What do you mean? It was just sound, just notes. I was numb. Everyone thought I was composed, impressive, but inside I was silent. She paused, and I've stayed that way for a long time. The confession floated between them like a candle's glow. Lily looked at the rose. Why did you come back in? To listen again, Mrs. Connors said. But not to music. Lily turned her head slightly. I wanted to listen to the silence, the teacher said. The one that came after you played. I've never heard a silence that full before. It was like everyone in that room felt something at the same time, and no one dared to speak because it might vanish if they did. Lily's lips curved faintly, eyes moist again. Mrs. Connors reached into her other pocket and took out a small object. It was a metronome. Old, worn, wooden. The kind used by pianists before digital screens took over. This belonged to my mom, she said, placing it gently on the seat between them. It was the first thing she gave me when I started learning. I used to hate it, always ticking, always demanding. Lily looked at it carefully. Its lacquer was chipped at the edges, but the brass arm still glinted. I kept it in a drawer for 20 years, Mrs. Connors added. I thought, maybe it should be yours now. Lily blinked, startled. Mine? The teacher nodded. You reminded me that time isn't something we keep. It's something we feel. You felt something no clock could measure, and you shared it. Lily reached out and touched the metronome with trembling fingers. It was heavy, solid, real, like memory, like legacy. I'll take care of it, she whispered. I know you will, Mrs. Connors replied. For a long moment they just sat. No words, just breathing, just presence. Outside, a soft wind rustled the trees near the school windows. Somewhere in the distance, a bell chimed from a nearby church tower. Evening had slipped in without announcement, turning the sky to lavender and ash. Mrs. Connors rose slowly. She looked at Lily with something close to reverence. You didn't just play a song, Lily. You gave people permission to feel. That's rare and powerful. Lily stood too, holding the metronome in both hands like a keepsake. I just didn't want her to be forgotten. She won't be, the teacher said, voice almost breaking. You've made sure of that. As Lily and her father left the auditorium that night, the lights behind them dimmed, but the glow of what had happened remained. A white rose still sat on the chair. The stage was empty, and yet somehow it felt full, because love, when given form through music, does not end when the last note fades. It lingers, it echoes, and sometimes it blooms. The video was never meant to go anywhere. It had been recorded quietly, almost as an afterthought. A single static camera placed by the school's AV club near the back of the auditorium, mostly for archival purposes. No special angles, no dramatic lighting, just a girl, a piano, a white rose, and a moment. But by Monday morning, something strange had happened. The school's YouTube channel, usually ignored a sleepy corner of the internet with barely 100 views per upload, was suddenly gaining traction. By mid-morning, the recital video had over 12,000 views. By lunch, it had reached 100,000. Lily sat in homeroom unaware, her eyes fixed on the condensation streaking down the classroom window. She hadn't been on her phone all day. She hadn't even told her friends that the performance had been posted. It felt too private, too sacred to share widely. But by the time she reached her locker that afternoon, students were pointing, not with the mockery she used to fear, but with a strange kind of wonder. Whispers filled the hallway again, but this time laced with awe. Have you seen it? She's the girl from the recital. I cried, like actually cried. I showed my mom, and she hugged me. Lily stood still, her fingers resting on the cold metal of her locker door. Then Chloe approached her usual strut, replaced by something softer. "I just wanted to say, thank you," she said, voice quiet. "I didn't get it before, when you cried during rehearsal. I thought it was weakness, but now I understand." Lily looked at her, blinking. Chloe nodded toward her phone. "They're calling you the girl with the rose. Someone even put the lyrics from your title card on a t-shirt. My aunt bought one." Lily blinked again, slower this time. "There are t-shirts?" "Yeah," Chloe laughed. "It's kind of blowing up." Lily's stomach fluttered, not with pride, but disbelief. The song had been for one person, one moment. How could it belong to the world now? She walked home that day in a daze. Even the trees seemed to whisper the melody back to her as the wind rustled the leaves. Her footsteps felt lighter and heavier at once, like the earth itself had shifted beneath her. At home, her father was sitting on the couch laptop, open eyes wide. You need to see this," he said. He turned the screen toward her. There it was, her face frozen in mid-performance, hands on the keys, a single tear visible down one cheek. The title was simple, "Still With Me," a daughter's song for her mother. Uploaded just 36 hours earlier, now at 1.4 million views. The comments section overflowed. "I lost my mom 3 years ago. This broke me in the best way." "This isn't music. This is truth. My daughter sent me this. We sat and cried together. Whoever this girl is, thank you. You healed something in me." Lily scrolled slowly, her hands trembling. It was overwhelming, beautiful, terrifying, sacred. And then she saw one comment pinned to the top, marked by a verified badge. From @Langston Piano Foundation. "Lily, if you see this, please know your composition is one of the most heartfelt pieces we've ever heard. We would love to feature you at our Youth Composers Showcase in New York this spring. Please reach out," she gasped. Her father looked at her, stunned. "They're real. That's huge." I never even thought about anyone else playing it," Lily murmured, voice shaking. Her father reached over, took her hand, and gave it a steady squeeze. "You played from love, Lily, and love travels." That night, their house filled with messages, calls, emails, letters. Reporters wanted interviews. Schools asked for permission to play the song in grief counseling programs. Parents sent video clips of their children listening to the performance, sometimes with their own white roses placed nearby. The world had picked up her melody and was humming it back. And yet, despite the noise, Lily felt more quiet than ever. Not silenced, just still. The kind of stillness you feel when you're finally heard. The kind of stillness her mother used to create when she read bedtime stories, her voice low and warm, her hand tracing circles on Lily's back. But there were moments too sharp, sudden, when guilt crept in. She would look at the viral numbers and feel a strange ache in her chest. What if people misunderstood? What if they turned her grief into performance? What if it became entertainment? She brought this fear to Mrs. Connors one afternoon. They sat alone in the music room after class had ended. The blinds were drawn halfway. Dust danced in the thin beams of sunlight. "I didn't write it for them," Lily said. "I wrote it for her. I don't want it to be just a trend." Mrs. Connors looked at her with the deep, even gaze of someone who had once lived that same fear. "Lily," she said slowly, "when something is written from truth, it can never be reduced. People may project things onto it, but that doesn't change what it is." She leaned forward. "Music is like water. It reflects what others bring to it, but its source remains pure." Lily bit her lip. "What if I don't want to share it anymore?" Mrs. Connors paused, then said gently, "Then don't. You have that right. But understand this. What you gave the world wasn't just a song. You gave them a map through grief. Some of them are just now learning how to feel. You lit a candle in a very dark place." Lily lowered her head and nodded. She didn't know yet if she would accept the invitation to New York. She didn't know if she would perform again in front of cameras or crowds. But she knew one thing. She was not alone, and neither was her mother. Because now in homes and hearts across the world, the same notes she once wrote with trembling fingers were being played by others. Children, adults, teachers, students. They were humming "Still With Me" in their kitchens, playing it on church pianos, teaching it in classrooms, mourning through it, healing through it. And always someone left a white rose beside the piano, as if they knew. as if they had heard her message. Love doesn't end. It echoes. The invitation still sat untouched on her desk. An elegant, cream-colored envelope, the embossed seal glinting faintly in the afternoon light. Inside, the Langston Piano Foundation's formal letter of invitation to New York, offering her a place in their spring showcase for youth composers. An honor reserved for prodigies Prot G.S. and students with polished R.Sum.S. Not for a girl who had once wept into her sheet music in a small-town school auditorium. Lily had read the letter only once, then closed it. She hadn't told anyone yet. Not even her father. Not because she didn't care, but because she wasn't sure if saying yes meant giving her song away to strangers who hadn't seen the rose on the chair, who hadn't felt the silence in that room, who hadn't loved her mother. Days passed. The world outside her window moved with its usual rhythm cars humming down the street. Crows settling in the oak branches, wind pushing golden leaves across the sidewalk. But Lily's world had slowed to something more tender, more deliberate. And then came a letter that changed everything. It arrived folded inside a pale blue envelope addressed by hand. No return address. Just a name scrawled in soft graphite pencil. Amelia, age 10. Lily opened it carefully. Inside, written in careful block letters with the occasional backwards S, was this here. Lily, I heard your song because my big sister showed it to me when I was crying after school. My mom died last year and I thought maybe I would forget what her hugs felt like. But then I heard your song and it felt like she was sitting next to me again. My sister cried too and we lit a candle. We put a white flower next to my music box. Thank you for helping me remember. I play your song on my keyboard now even though I mess up a lot. Love, Amelia. Lily stared at the paper for a long time. The ink wobbled in some places like tears had smudged it. A child's handwriting. A child's grief. A white flower by a music box. And suddenly, Lily realized something. This wasn't about a performance anymore. It wasn't about viral videos or foundation invitations or spotlights. It was about remembrance. It was about connection. It was about telling other people, especially the ones too small, too quiet, or too broken to speak, that they weren't alone in their sadness, and that their sadness had music in it too. That evening, she returned to the auditorium. The building was empty. The janitor let her in with a small nod. He remembered her performance too. Everyone did. She walked the familiar corridor with slow, careful steps. Her shoes echoed faintly on the polished floor. The doors creaked open as she pushed them, and there, in the soft, amber wash of the stage lights, the piano waited. She wasn't wearing anything formal, just a sweatshirt, old sneakers, hair tied loosely, no stage makeup, no microphone, just her. She stepped onto the stage, dragging her backpack behind her. Inside it, she carried only two things: the sheet music to Still With Me and Amelia's letter. She placed them both on the piano stand. Then she sat. The keys were cool beneath her fingers. Familiar now, like an old friend whose touch brought more comfort than conversation. She took a deep breath and began. The notes rose again, not the same as before, not rehearsed. This version carried the weight of days past, of letters written of children like Amelia listening in small bedrooms with candles flickering beside them. This time, she let the melody drift. She added soft pauses. She left open spaces between chords like doorways for memories to slip through. Her fingers played slowly, deliberately, each note shaped by a new kind of strength. Not loudness, not perfection. Resilience. The song reached its peak, still aching, still bittersweet, but now with less tremor in her hands, less fear. This wasn't her saying goodbye anymore. This was her saying, I remember, and I'll carry you. When the last note faded into the cavernous silence, Lily didn't move. She sat there, her eyes closed. She let the quiet hold her, let it press gently around her like a warm coat in winter. When she opened her eyes, something shimmered in the front row, a single white rose, fresh, placed there when she hadn't noticed. Her heart jumped. She walked to the edge of the stage and stepped down. She approached the chair slowly, reverently. There was no note, no signature, only the rose. She bent and picked it up carefully, bringing it to her chest. Picked it. Behind her, she heard the soft creak of the auditorium door. She turned. It was Mrs. Connors. Her expression was unreadable, but her hands were clasped in front of her heart, and her eyes glistened. "I thought it was time," she said, voice barely more than a whisper, "to place the rose myself." Lily's throat caught. She nodded, too full for words. Mrs. Connors stepped closer. "I heard you were thinking about New York," she said gently. Lily looked down. "I don't know if I belong there," she whispered. "My song's not trained." "It's not supposed to be," her teacher replied. "It's true, and the world needs that more than another perfectly polished performance." She stepped beside her, gazing at the rose in Lily's hands. "If you go," she added, "you won't be alone." Lily looked up. "You'd come." Mrs. Connors smiled, soft and steady. "I'd sit in the front row, with a rose of my own." The silence between them felt holy. Then Lily said something that surprised even herself. "I think I want to share it again." Not for the stage, not for the applause, but for the little girl with the music box. For the father who hadn't cried in months until a melody gave him permission. For the teacher who found her own mother again through a student's courage. For herself. Because grief once unspeakable had found its voice, and its echo was not pain, but presence. They left the auditorium together, the white rose cradled in Lily's hand. Outside, the evening sky opened like a curtain to stars. The wind was cool and soft, threading through the trees in whispering waves. Lily paused before stepping into the car, looking up. Somewhere beyond those stars, beyond the noise and noise of the world, she felt it. Not just memory, not just hope, but her mother's quiet, everlasting presence. Still with her, always. The first thing Lily noticed about New York was the sound. It wasn't the sharp chaos she had imagined from movies, the honking, the shouting, the constant blur. It was something deeper. A low, endless hum. A pulse. As if the entire city breathed with a rhythm all its own, and she had merely stepped into the beat. She stood on the sidewalk outside the music hall, her suitcase handle tight in her grip, her heart echoing louder than the traffic. A wall of glass reflected the gray sky above, and the tall buildings that stood like watchful sentinels all around. Her name was on the program, printed in gold. Lily Harper, original composition, Still With Me. It felt surreal, like reading a dream she had never dared to speak aloud. Inside, the Langston showcase was already coming to life. Staff with lanyards and clipboards bustled in and out of the lobby. Musicians carried instruments in velvet-lined cases, and parents with polished shoes and proud eyes clustered near the ticket booth. Lily held her music folder close to her chest as she entered. The performance would be held in the Langston Recital Hall, one of the most prestigious youth stages in the country. Red velvet curtains, polished black Steinway grand, tiered seats in a semicircle that curved like a listening ear. But all of that faded when Lily saw the front row. One chair was already marked with a small white place card. In clean, elegant handwriting it read, "Reserved Rose Guest." She blinked, then looked toward the back of the room where Mrs. Connors stood, calm, composed, and unmistakably there. She nodded softly, giving Lily a small smile. Her way of saying, "I told you, you wouldn't be alone." Later, backstage, Lily sat on a bench in the dressing room, her fingers lightly brushing the keys of a practice piano. Her sheet music rested on the stand. This was the first time she would play it outside her town, outside her school, outside the space where her mother had lived and loved and left. And yet the melody hadn't changed. It still rose and fell like breath, still whispered like a memory, still carried her mother's voice in every pause. One of the Langston coordinators approached and handed her a small microphone. "You'll be introduced in 10 minutes. Are you ready?" Lily took a deep breath and nodded, but her hands were shaking. As she waited in the wings, she looked down at the metronome Mrs. Connors had given her. She had brought it all the way from home, tucked safely in her suitcase. Now it sat beside her on the narrow ledge, ticking softly. Its rhythm was not perfect. It ticked with the tiniest wobble, but it was steady. Lily placed her fingers on the top of the wooden box and whispered to it. not really to the object, but to what it held. "Play like she's still listening," she murmured. Her cue came. The stage lights warmed her skin as she stepped forward, her shoes making soft, sure sounds on the wood floor. The audience, hundreds now, watched her with quiet curiosity. No one whispered, no one judged. And in the second row, Mrs. Connors gave her one small, steady nod. Lily reached the microphone and took a moment before she spoke. "This song is called Still With Me," she said. "I wrote it after I lost my mom." There was a hush in the crowd. "But I'm learning now. It's not just about her. It's for anyone who's ever missed someone or remembered someone through music or felt something so strong they didn't know how to say it." She glanced at the chair with the white rose. "I play this so that even when we lose someone, they don't have to disappear." Then she sat. The piano bench was softer than the one at her school, the keys smoother, but her fingers knew what to do. They didn't ask permission. They remembered. She began with a whisper. The opening notes barely touched the air, as if testing the room. Then came the middle section, the one she had rewritten over tears and dusklight, the one where grief slid between octaves like water through fingers. And when she reached the passage where she used to falter, where her hands once trembled before stopping completely, she played it now with reverence. She didn't cry this time, but the ache was still there. That quiet ache you feel when you miss someone, not with pain, but with presence. The final note hung in the hall like breath caught in time. And when it faded, the silence returned. Not the silence of expectation, but the silence of awe. Of hearts paused, of eyes wide with the realization that something had just entered them that would not leave. And then, thunderous applause. But Lily didn't stand right away. She looked at the white rose in the front row, sitting still and radiant, and she smiled. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Congratulations. Warm hands shaking hers. Young musicians asking about her inspiration. A woman from a grief foundation requesting to license the song. Even a conservatory director asking if she'd consider composing professionally one day. But none of that settled in her soul quite the same way as what came next. Backstage, as the audience filtered out, a woman approached. She had long silver hair tied back in a bun and carried a cane. A small child walked beside her, maybe 8 years old, holding a tablet. The woman smiled kindly. "I'm Amelia's grandmother," she said softly. Lily froze. The child stepped forward. "I brought my music box." She opened it and played a soft tune that tinkled into the air. "I wanted you to know," Amelia said shyly. "Your song helped me remember what her hugs felt like." Lily knelt, her eyes shimmering. "I'm glad." The child took something from her pocket, a paper rose, made from folded sheet music. "Can you keep this?" she asked. Lily nodded and took it like it was made of glass. That night in her hotel room, Lily placed the paper rose beside the metronome. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't dream in silence. She dreamed in music. It was a Tuesday morning when Lily returned home. The sun greeted her through the frosted window pane with the kind of warmth that didn't ask for anything. Just light. Just presence. The taxi dropped her off in front of the small white house on Maple Street, where the porch still creaked in the wind and the mailbox leaned just slightly to the left. The moment she stepped out, she heard birdsong. Not loud, not theatrical. Just soft chirps like punctuation in a silence she now knew how to treasure. Her father met her at the door with 2 mugs of cocoa and a quiet hug. He didn't ask how the performance went. He didn't need to. She handed him the paper rose Amelia had given her, and for a long while they stood in the living room, not speaking. The television was off. The house was still. The piano sat in its corner like an old friend waiting to be spoken to again. Later that afternoon, Lily walked alone to the neighborhood park. The air was cool, wrapped in early spring. Trees stretched out their bony branches toward a sky that had not yet decided whether it wanted to be winter or warmth. She sat on the same bench where she and her mother had once eaten ice cream in silence, when words were too hard and time was too short. In her lap, a leather-bound notebook. A new one. Not the songbook. This one was empty. She opened the first page and wrote a date in the top right corner, then paused. She stared out at the field beyond the path where two kids were kicking a soccer ball and somewhere a dog barked, chasing after something invisible. Lily closed her eyes and listened, not for music, but for memory. For the way grief no longer stung but shimmered like the shine of rain on pavement long after the clouds had passed. The melody of Still With Me no longer looped in her head. It had settled, not as noise, not even as song, but as belonging. She opened her eyes and began to write. Not a composition this time, but a letter. Dear Mom, I played your song in New York. There was a white rose in the front row. A lot of them, actually. One girl folded a rose out of sheet music and gave it to me. Another child lit a candle. People said they felt their loved ones near. I guess your lullaby didn't stay small. I thought it would hurt to share it, but now I know. Grief shared is grief softened. You told me to play from my heart, and I did. But you didn't tell me that by doing that I would give others their voices back too. Thank you for the music. Thank you for the silence too. I'm not scared of either anymore. Love, Lily. She closed the notebook gently. The wind picked up just slightly, tugging at the edges of her coat. She held it tighter, stood, and walked home slowly, deliberately, each step a quiet testimony. The days that followed fell into rhythm again, school, homework, evening walks. But something had changed. Not outside. Inside. Her world no longer felt small. Not because it had grown, but because her place within it had deepened. She began teaching a few younger students in the afternoons. Nothing formal, just kids from the neighborhood. One of them was Amelia. She came every Thursday with her backpack, her music box, and a folded flower she gave Lily at the end of every lesson. And together they played. Sometimes scales, sometimes silence, sometimes laughter between wrong notes and giggles. Lily found herself laughing more now, too. She laughed in ways she hadn't since before the hospital visits. The old ache in her chest had not disappeared, but it had softened into something quieter, something kind. Grief, she learned, didn't vanish. It simply made room for more life. In the school auditorium, a new plaque was mounted on the wall beside the stage. The letters were etched in brass, small but unmistakable, "Still with me," in honor of the music that heals, and the silence that speaks louder than applause. Mrs. Connors stood beside Lily the day it was unveiled. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. Their presence beside one another was enough, a quiet proof of growth, forgiveness, and the long arc of learning. "I'm starting a new composition," Lily said softly, eyes still on the plaque. Mrs. Connors turned. "Another tribute?" Lily shook her head with a smile. "No, this one's for someone I haven't met yet." The teacher raised an eyebrow. "For who?" "I don't know," Lily said. "But someone out there will need it." A pause. Then Mrs. Connors smiled, eyes gleaming. "Then write it," she whispered. The seasons turned. Spring returned in full color, then summer with its lazy afternoons, and eventually autumn again, where red leaves spiraled down like falling embers. Lily kept playing. She composed in small pieces, short movements, whispers of ideas that fluttered in like birds and stayed for tea. Nothing grand, just honest. Sometimes late at night she would sit at the piano with no sheet music at all, just her hands, her breath, and the silent memory of a woman who once told her, "Play for me when I'm gone." And she did. Not because she was gone, but because she wasn't. Lily learned in time that the most powerful music does not demand attention. It doesn't seek a stage or wait for applause. It lives in small rooms, in handwritten letters, in a folded rose, in a child's whisper, in silence that comes not from emptiness, but from love too deep for words. And though the last note of "Still With Me" had long since faded into the world, it never really ended. It echoed, in every heart that needed it, in every child who found their voice in its quiet, in every person who sat alone in grief and suddenly heard music again. And in the quiet spaces between Lily's laughter and tears, it sang softly forever, still with her, always, In a world that often rewards perfection over truth, Lily's story reminds us that real beauty lives in vulnerability. Her tears at the piano weren't signs of weakness. They were proof of a soul unafraid to feel. Grief has a sound. And when we allow ourselves to hear it, to express it, to share it, it becomes music that heals not just ourselves, but everyone who listens. The teacher who once mocked her learned that discipline without compassion is hollow. And the silence that followed Lily's final note became louder than applause, because it carried love, remembrance, and presence. No matter what pain you carry, know this: your story matters. Your voice matters. Your grief, your love, your memories, they don't fade. When spoken from the heart, they echo across generations. So cry if you must. Sing if you can, and play, always play for those who are still with you, even if only in spirit. Because music, like love, never dies. It transforms. And somewhere, someone needs to hear your song.